Leave campaign joins us now from Westminster to talk about this. Good morning to you, Mr. Redwood.
Good morning.
Now, this is the latest in a long line of reports claiming that the economy would be badly hit by a Brexit. You've got the Bank of England, the Treasury, the IMF, and now the IFS. It's almost a near consensus that leaving the EU would be bad for the UK economy.
Well, this piece of research, of course, just draws on one of the other gloomy forecasts. They review a whole range of forecasts, including the economists for Brexit and the Open Europe ones, which say we'd be better off out of the European Union. They choose to highlight one of the gloomy ones. But there is some good news in the IFS report for Vote Leave, because they at last, amongst all these forecasters, agree with us that when we get to spend our own money, all that money we have to send to the European Union and don't get back, we'll be able to create jobs and services and incomes here in Britain. And so that will actually provide a boost to the economy.
And how much credence do you give to the IFS report that's out today? They are a think tank seen as independent and widely respected, but 11% of their funding actually comes from the EU.
Yes, they get funding from European institutions, and this particular piece of work, which is funded by the Economic and Social Research Council, has on it the UK in a changing Europe logo, so we know where they're coming from. But I'm quite happy to engage with them on the merits and demerits of what they're saying. And as I say, at least they acknowledge that there will be a decent boost to our economy from spending our own money, so that actually means less austerity. They then pick up this other report, which says there's going to be a big drop in the pound and a big increase in interest rates for no apparently good reason. And of course, if you put in those kind of assumptions, you end up a bit worse off than if you didn't put in those assumptions. But I think the pound and interest rates will be more determined by what happens in America, what happens in China, than it will be by whether we decide to leave the EU or not. And I cannot see why, once we get that extra money to spend and that extra prosperity on the back of that, the pound should be particularly weak or interest rates should have to go up.
The economy is becoming a rather powerful argument. You know, a few weeks ago it was all about migration, but there is a lot of focus by in-campaigners on the economy, and that is now appearing to lead the agenda when it comes to this debate. And the reason this is proving a powerful argument for them is because it hits people in the pocket. One of the headlines to come out is that people's mortgages would go up if we were to leave the EU. And it does appear that the out-campaigners don't have any hard figures to hit back with when it comes to economics.
Well, because we're being honest, these are all forecasts about what might happen over the next 5 or 10 years from people who've got their forecasts horribly wrong in the past. These establishment forecasters didn't spot the great recession of 2008. They didn't understand how the European exchange rate mechanism would do terrible damage to our economy, and they never really apologised for that. On the Vote Leave side, we're not going to give you a set of false forecasts of what the economy will look like in 2030 in the way the Treasury does, but we're very sure that the negative things they put in are just overdone and extremely unlikely.
You're saying they're negative, but are you then saying they're dishonest?
No, I'm not saying they're dishonest. I'm saying they're wrong. I think they are wrong just as they were catastrophically wrong over the European exchange rate mechanism crisis, as they were wrong over the euro crisis, they were wrong over the big banking crash of the last decade. We know that these establishment forecasters all club together and often make catastrophic mistakes, which does indeed cost us jobs and livelihoods in Britain. If we leave the EU, I think we will be better off because we'll spend our own money on our own priorities. We'll get rid of some of the austerity more quickly. And I just don't see that the fact of leaving the EU is going to do any damage to our trade or to the main investments coming into our country from companies that are well connected here and have factories here which they wish to reinforce.
How are you going to get migration back on the agenda? Because it does appear that migration, the refugee crisis, that is your strongest card when it comes to winning this EU referendum. How are you going to get that back in the spotlight over the next 4 weeks before the vote?
Well, I mean, it's very kind of you to mention it because you're doing just that. I think it's out there. I think migration is on the ballot paper as well as economic prospects. And on both, I think the Vote Leave has the better story to tell. We think we're going to be better off. And we think we're going to have fairer migration because once we control our own borders and make our own decisions, we will decide who to invite in. And at the moment, our immigration is very unfair because we have to have much tougher controls on the rest of the world than we're allowed to place on the European Union, whereas what we want to do is to attract the people of talent and commitment to this country that we would like to see.
It's nice to be accused of being kind in this debate, because obviously the other argument is often centred at us when we come into this debate. We are impartial. Do you think the Prime Minister should be taking part in head-to-head TV debates? He's avoiding that at the moment. Do you think he should entertain that idea?
Yes, I think it'd be much better if he did a head-to-head debate with a senior representative for Vote Leave, and I think it's quite wrong that television should allow the Remain side to determine who should be the spokesman on the Leave side. I think just as the Remain side choose quite often to have the Prime Minister as their spokesman, we should be able to choose who represents us.
OK, John Redwood from the Vote Leave campaign, thank you very much for speaking to us here on Sunrise this morning.
You didn't frankly have the balls to put country before party.